In the heart of a galaxy filled with countless civilizations, a single vote sealed humanity's fate. Fearing their strength, adaptability, and relentless will to survive, the Great Council chose to enslave Earth before it could rise to power. Generations passed under alien chains, yet in the shadows of oppression, unlikely alliances formed between conquerors and the conquered. Bonds of trust and cooperation grew in quiet places, while hatred and resentment smoldered just out of sight. As time reshaped empires and wars tore across the stars, the roles of master and slave blurred. Humanity learned from its captors, turning knowledge into weapons, hope into strategy. The galaxy's old powers would one day face the truth they had feared most: humans could not be broken forever. When the day came, they would stand united, and the galaxy would beg for mercy. The Grand Council chamber rose like a cathedral of power, its vaulted ceiling swallowed by shadow. Tier upon tier of seats circled the central podium in great concentric rings, each one occupied by the most influential species in the galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices and climate controls, tuned to keep 100 alien biologies comfortable while they debated the fate of worlds. Representative Karx's clawed feet clicked sharply on the polished floor as he strode to the podium. His species had evolved from apex predators, and it showed in every measured step: backward-jointed legs ending in hooked talons, an elongated skull lined with sensor pits that could read the smallest change in heat or movement. When he spoke, his voice carried a deep harmonic undertone. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, manipulating the podium's holographic controls. Above him, an image of a blue and white world shimmered into view. "This is Earth, home of a newly discovered species that calls itself human. They represent a unique and urgent threat to galactic stability." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Alongside the planet's image, streams of data appeared: atmospheric composition, gravity, and climate statistics. Karx ignored those, focusing instead on the numbers that mattered to him. "In the past single solar cycle of their world," he continued, "humans have engaged in more than 50 armed conflicts. Their greatest technological advances have been driven by war. When they split the atom, it was to build weapons. When they reached their moon, it was to win an arms race. Even their most important medical breakthroughs come from treating battlefield injuries." In a high-tier box, Grand Duke Feldorf shifted uncomfortably, his sleek aquatic form settling deeper into his cushioned seat. His aide leaned close, whispering something that made the Duke's blowhole flare with concern. Karx moved to his next point. "Their violent history is only part of the danger. They can survive almost any environment: heat, cold, drought, starvation. Their endurance surpasses 90% of known species. They can heal from injuries that would kill others. And most troubling of all," he paused for effect, "they adapt. Not just culturally, but physically. Their bodies grow stronger in hardship. Their minds find new solutions faster than most species can react. Left unchecked, they will become unstoppable." A few delegates exchanged uneasy glances. "We have two choices," Karx said, his voice tightening with urgency. "We can wait for them to reach interstellar travel on their own, through more war, and face what they become. Or we can act now, while they are still primitive, and ensure their strength serves the galaxy instead of threatening it." The chamber erupted into a low storm of discussion. Representatives consulted their aides, and encrypted messages flew through private diplomatic channels. "I propose," Karx raised his voice above the noise, "that we take control of this species immediately. Their physiology makes them ideal for labor in dangerous environments. Their adaptability means they can work where others cannot. Under proper guidance, they could be a great asset, rather than a great threat." Duke Feldorf rose, his massive aquatic frame drawing every eye. "And what of their potential for peace? For art, music, philosophy? Are we to condemn an entire species based on their capacity for violence, rather than their proven capacity for growth?" "With respect, Your Grace," Karx replied, "we cannot risk the stability of the galaxy on hope. Their history speaks for itself." "Their history speaks of survival," Feldorf countered. Every species here evolved through conflict. Would any of us wish to be judged solely by our worst moments? The Duke's words found little traction. The merchant species saw profit in a strong labor force. The military powers saw an opportunity to expand their ground troops. When the vote came, the results flashed across the chamber, overwhelming support for immediate intervention. Only a handful of systems, led by the Duke's own people, opposed it. As the delegates began to leave, Karks approached the Duke's box. You understand this is for the greater good. Better to guide them firmly now than face them as equals later. Feldorf's blowhole released a soft spray, the sigh of his kind. I understand only that we have chosen fear over faith, Representative. I pray we do not live to regret it. The Duke stayed long after the others had gone, watching the slowly rotating image of Earth. Somewhere on that unsuspecting blue marble, humanity went about its day, unaware that beings they had never met had just voted to chain them. In the Duke's mind, the decision was a wound the galaxy might never heal. The invasion came in flashes of fire and steel. Cities burned under skies filled with alien warships. Orbital bombardments turned neighborhoods into scorched wastelands in seconds. The oceans boiled where energy lances struck, and the air itself shimmered with heat over continents under siege. Within 3 months, Earth's governments had collapsed. Within 6, the last coordinated resistance was broken. Humanity's surrender was broadcast across 100 worlds, translated into 1,000 languages as a warning and a promise. The newest labor force of the galaxy was ready for integration. Lady Marisol Feldorf stood at the viewport of her family's last remaining estate ship. Supply shuttles drifted between the burnt-out husks of orbital platforms. Even from this height, she could see Earth scars, brown swaths of scorched earth where cities had been erased, smoke still curling from the largest craters. Her aide, Piono, spoke from behind her. The Crimson Baron has formally revoked our trading rights. His smaller aquatic form sagged with exhaustion. Without those routes, my lady, we cannot maintain even this reduced fleet. How many ships remain? Marisol asked, her voice flat. 3. Including this one. It was a long fall from the hundreds that once carried the Feldorf crest. Her father's opposition to the invasion had cost them everything, allies turned away, trade agreements dissolved, and political favors withdrawn. Then, not long ago, the Grand Duke had died, leaving her to hold together the tattered remains of their house. A chime interrupted her thoughts. The new arrivals are ready for inspection, my lady. Marisol straightened her robes and followed Piono to the converted cargo bay. The vast space smelled faintly of metal and disinfectant. 20 humans stood in a rough line, wearing simple gray tunics, the mark of newly processed laborers. Behind them loomed a guard, a massive crack-thigh enforcer, his overlapping horn plates gleaming under the lights. These are from the mountain settlements, Piono explained. The Carpenter family and their associates. They hid in caves for months before hunger forced them out. Marisol studied their faces. Humans were expressive, too expressive, perhaps, every flicker of emotion plain to see. One man stepped forward slightly, his dark hair streaked with gray, his face weathered by wind and sun. Marcus Carpenter, he said simply. I speak for my family. The crack-thigh moved to strike him for speaking out of turn, but Marisol's fluke slapped the deck sharply. That won't be necessary. I prefer my workers whole. She stepped closer. Your people fought well. We lost, Marcus replied evenly. Yes, she said. You did. Marisol turned to address the group. I am Lady Marisol Feldorf. You are now bound to my house, what remains of it. You will work, but you will not be abused. Your families will stay together. This is not kindness, it is practicality. Broken tools serve no one. A young woman near the end of the line spoke up, defiance in her voice. And if we refuse? Marisol didn't blink. Then you will be sold to the crack-thigh mines. Few survive more than a year there. The silence that followed was heavy. They understood. Marcus's voice cut through. We'll work. But I want your word, your personal word, that my family stays together. Marisol met his gaze. In his eyes she saw the same fierce determination she had felt when she stood in the council chamber years ago, watching her father lose the vote. You have it, she said. The word of House Feldorf still means something, even now. She gestured to Piono. Get them settled in the habitat wing. Full medical screening. Proper nutrition. And, she hesitated, thinking, access to the educational databases. If they serve my house, they should know its history. The crack thigh guard's mandibles clicked in disapproval, but he said nothing. As the humans were led away, Marcus glanced back at her. Not with hatred. Not with fear. With calculation. Later, in her quarters, Piono brought her the latest financial reports. We could sell some of them, he suggested reluctantly. The crack thigh would pay well for the stronger ones. No, Marisol said sharply. My father opposed this invasion because he believed it was wrong. I will not dishonor his memory by breaking my word. Then we must find another way to rebuild, Piono replied. The old routes are closed. Marisol turned back to the viewport, watching the planet turn slowly below. Then we'll make new ones. These humans survived underground for months. Perhaps they can teach us something about adaptation. It was the first time anyone in her household had suggested learning from humanity instead of exploiting them. She didn't notice it then, but later, she would remember this moment as the first shift in a long chain of changes. Above the planet, Earth's wounded skies cleared slowly, the smoke thinning. The scars would take centuries to fade. But some wounds, she thought, might never heal, not in the land, and not in the heart. 2 decades after the invasion, the great estates were gone. The House of Feldorf, once one of the galaxy's most respected, now worked its own fields to meet impossible quotas. Inside a failing agri-dome, Jorah Feldorf knelt in the dirt, her dorsal ridge aching from hours of inspection. The artificial sunlight above cast a sickly yellow over the wilted rows of earth crops. Their leaves drooped, edges brown and curling. Something was wrong again, the third crop failure this season. The bacteria aren't fixing nitrogen, said Diane Carpenter, crouching beside her. The human's hands moved with practiced ease, checking the roots. We need to adjust the pH. Jorah's fluke slapped the ground in frustration. We can't afford more imported amendments. The new Baron doubled the tariffs again. Diane's weathered face didn't change. She had been with the family since before Jorah was born, inherited along with the land when creditors stripped away everything else. Her grandfather had been among the first humans taken by House Feldorf. Diane herself had grown up learning farming from both her human kin and Jorah's parents. We can make our own amendments, Diane said, pulling a small data pad from her work vest. The right minerals are in the local rock. We just need to process them. Jorah's blowhole flared in surprise. Where did you get access to chemical databases? Your mother's old educational files, Diane replied, lips quirking. Nobody thought a human would understand them, so they never restricted the access. A decade ago, Jorah might have been shocked. Now, she just nodded. Necessity had eroded old prejudice. Diane wasn't just a laborer, she was the reason they had any harvest at all. Show me, Jorah said. They spent hours in the dirt, Diane explaining the chemical process while Jorah calculated yields. The method could work, but they'd need to modify equipment. I can rework the old water filters, Diane said. It's similar. You're not authorized to handle machinery without supervision, Jorah reminded her. Diane raised an eyebrow. Technically, you're supposed to be living in a mansion instead of digging in the dirt. They both smiled, a small thing, but real. The sound of heavy footsteps made them look up. A crack thigh enforcer filled the dome's entrance, his armor plates scraping the frame. Routine inspection, he said, his voice dripping with mock courtesy. His gaze slid to Diane. Humans aren't authorized to handle technical documentation. She's assisting me, Jorah said evenly. Your family's noble status was revoked, the enforcer interrupted. Colonial regulations apply. Humans go to the general labor pool, not kept by one farm. We have documentation, Jorah countered. Which expires at the end of the season, the enforcer replied. Unless you meet the new quota. He left without further threat, but the meaning was clear. They want this land, Diane said quietly. The quotas are just an excuse. Jorah's fluke tensed. Then we have 3 months to meet them. If your process works, we'll make it. My grandfather stayed with your family when he could have run, Diane said. My father told me why. Whatever happens, we face it together. Jorah looked at the wilted plants, the jury-rigged equipment, the single dome surrounded by massive alien-owned complexes. They had little left, except this bond, forged in hardship. Together, she agreed. 3 generations later, the domes shone under the morning sun like jewels. Deluz Feldorf stood on the viewing platform, his dorsal ridge casting a long shadow across the deck. Rows of interconnected agri-domes stretched to the horizon. Each one thrived. Complex 17 broke its yield record again, said Vixari, his operations director. And 0 injuries in human crews. Deluz allowed a faint smile. Let the inspectors come. Our records are clean. Dignity costs less than replacing workers. Below, human and aquatic crews worked side by side without overseers carrying shock prods. No chains, no collars, just teams who knew their work and took pride in it. The Harvest Council meets next week, Vixari said. They'll investigate our unusual practices again. Our yields will speak for us, Deluz replied. He glanced toward Dome 12, where a class of humans studied soil chemistry. The Carpenter family descendants ran several dome sections now. Other human families had risen to supervisory roles as well, chosen for skill, not status. A chime announced a visitor. Rylan Carpenter entered, carrying a data pad. Like many humans here, he wore standard work clothes, not slave uniforms. The Maxon Consortium wants our cultivation protocols, he reported. Not the training programs, just the specs. Deluz made a sound like laughter. They want fruit without planting the tree. Ryland's expression turned grim. News from the mines. 300 dead. Mostly older workers and children. Vixari flinched. That's not our concern, it is, Deluz cut in. Increase education budgets by 20%. Every human should be trained in at least 2 technical systems. Let the council see the difference in our numbers. As the others left, Deluz stayed at the viewport. His great-grandmother had started this, treating humans as people, not tools. His grandmother expanded it. His mother refined it. Now he would protect it. It wasn't freedom. Not yet. But it was something worth fighting for. The legislative chamber of New Satia was nothing like the Grand Council Hall where humanity's fate had been sealed generations ago. It was built for function over grandeur, clean composite walls instead of carved stone, efficient climate systems instead of echoing ceilings. But to Maris Feldorf, standing at the central podium, it was no less intimidating. The numbers don't lie, she began, dorsal ridge straight despite the tension in her fluke. Worlds that have adopted our agricultural protocols show consistent improvements in productivity. The link between humane working conditions for humans and economic output is undeniable. Holographic charts flickered above her, crop yields, industrial efficiency ratings, worker longevity, decades of data, all pointing to the same conclusion. A heavily plated crack-thighed delegate rumbled from the opposition benches. Our methods have served for generations. Your methods kill 40% of your workforce every year, Maris shot back. You spend more replacing dead workers than we do training living ones. It's not just cruel. It's wasteful. Murmurs swept through the chamber. To openly challenge the Crackthigh was rare, and dangerous. But 3 generations of Feldorf carpenter cooperation had given her a sliver of political weight the family hadn't seen since before the invasion. This is more than economics, she pressed on. Every sapient species here has basic protections under law. Even our food animals have a standard of care. Yet humans, whose intelligence equals our own, are classified as property. From the corner of her vision, she saw Drake Carpenter, Chief Operations Advisor for Feldorf Enterprises, watching from the sidelines. He couldn't speak here, humans were still barred from addressing the legislature, but his presence was a reminder of why she was doing this. I propose, Maris raised her voice, a basic standard of human rights. No extreme reforms, just fundamental protections against abuse, requirements for food and rest, and the right to earn status through merit. The chamber erupted in noise. Crackthigh delegates clicked their plates in fury. Merchant houses whispered furiously with their aides, already calculating profits and losses. You would upend centuries of order, the Crackthigh speaker growled. Next, you'll want them to vote. I want to prevent the waste of valuable resources, Maris replied coolly. Your own financial reports show our methods cost less. Drake shifted subtly, their prearranged signal. Support was building among the merchant faction. A merchant representative finally spoke. Perhaps, a test program? Limited to agriculture? Unacceptable, the Crackthigh barked, but more merchants joined in, voluntary participation. Incentives for early adoption. Gradual implementation. It wasn't everything Maris had hoped for. But when the vote came, it passed, barely. The reforms were small: no physical punishment, mandatory rest periods, minimum nutrition standards, and the ability to earn privileges through service. Only in agriculture. Only on one world. It's not enough, Drake said quietly hours later, walking with her through the polished corridors. It's a start, Maris replied. Change comes gradually, then suddenly. You taught me that. He smiled faintly. My great-grandfather used to say freedom grows like crops. You plant the seeds, tend them carefully, and trust the harvest will come. Yes, she said, holding his gaze. And today, we planted something new. The harvest didn't come the way they imagined. 3 years later, the sky over Feldorf territory burned. Kayla Feldorf stood on the shuttle's observation deck, watching riots tear through the domes her family had built over generations. Smoke billowed into the atmosphere, fire racing across the linked complexes. The mining colonies are in full revolt, her security chief reported, fluke twitching. The Crackthigh can't contain it. Someone's given the humans military-grade weapons. Kayla didn't have to ask who. An incoming transmission lit the screen, Thean Carpenter, smoke and sparks behind him. We've secured the storage silos, he reported, but we can't hold them. Crackthigh bombardment is too heavy. You shouldn't have to, Kayla said. The Liberation Front isn't my people, Thean snapped. My people built these domes with yours. We fought for real change, not this bloodbath. But I can't stop them now. Another explosion shook the image. They won't distinguish between us, Kayla warned. Someone has to protect the seed vaults, Thean said. Everything we developed, drought-resistant strains, atmospheric adapters, it's all there. The future will need that, when this burning is done. Come with us, she urged. He shook his head. We knew this might happen. Too much pressure for too long, it had to break somewhere. The screen went black. Course heading, the pilot asked. Neutral territories, Kayla said. The merchant fleet is regrouping there. As they broke orbit, she watched the news feeds, liberation victories on a dozen worlds, Crackthigh orbital strikes flattening cities, merchant houses fleeing. The old dream, peaceful cooperation, was collapsing into ash. Play archival file, she ordered. Her mother's voice filled the cabin, speaking in the legislature years earlier about dignity over fear. Naive, perhaps. But not wrong. We failed, Kayla murmured. Not because the idea was wrong, but because we tried to compromise with a broken system. She turned to her security chief. Send word to the fleet, Feldorf offers sanctuary to any human fleeing the war zones. We'll face the consequences. The Crackthai will call us enemies, he warned. They already were, she said. The shuttle accelerated, leaving behind a world in flames, and a bond between families that no war could fully destroy. Decades after the war, Kayla Feldorf's hoverchair hummed softly as she moved toward the wide observation window of her modest apartment. Beyond it, the capital of the Universal Life Federation sprawled in every direction, a living mosaic of habitats and spires for dozens of species. Atmospheric domes shimmered, holding alien climates in balance. Humans walked freely in the streets below, mingling with scaled, plated, and furred forms. Her blowhole released a thin spray, a sigh. The peace was fragile, and she knew it. On the newsfeed floating at her side, 3 conflicts played out at once. The Human Planetary League, born from the Liberation Front's most militant factions, was advancing again on the Crackthai border. In other sectors, the Federation's diplomatic corps scrambled to hold alliances together. Old wounds still bled, even under new flags. Her attendant, Assard Carpenter, approached with medical scans in hand. The League has taken 3 more systems. At least they're evacuating civilians. Kayla nodded faintly. Watch their ground forces, Assard. There's no mercy for the Crackthai. The feed shifted to show League troops moving in perfect, ruthless formation, their weapons built to pierce the horn-plated armor of their old masters. The same dignity over fear ideals Kayla's family had fought for seemed far away now. Not all humans are like that, Assard said gently. The Federation grows stronger every year. More worlds join. More species work together. True, Kayla admitted. But the shadow of what was done to them will hang over us for generations. A chime signaled a visitor. Reed Carpenter, grandson of Theon, entered. He carried himself with the same quiet dignity his grandfather had shown in the domes before the war. The council is meeting, he said without preamble. They want your testimony. The hardliners are pushing for preemptive strikes against the League. The moderates think you can remind them that coexistence is possible. Kayla almost laughed. They want me to tell them how my family got rich from slave labor, so they can feel better about negotiating with former rebels. They want you to tell them about the seed vaults, Reed said. About how humans and aliens work together to save something lasting. Kayla's gaze drifted back to the city. Somewhere in the Federation archives, the agricultural knowledge she and Theon's family had built still fed millions. Very well, she said at last. Help me prepare. Not far away, the galaxy's comms lit up with a broadcast. The camera swept over the old Grand Council chamber, the same hall where humanity's enslavement had been voted into law. Now, alien counselors knelt on the floor, forced into poses of submission. Behind them stood black-armored human soldiers, their weapons ceremonial but unmistakably deadly. Augustus Vale, Supreme Commander of the Human Planetary League, stepped into view. His voice was calm, precise. For centuries, you held power in this chamber. You used it to chain my people. Today, humanity speaks with one voice. Another figure joined him, Brendan Mace, High Commissioner of the Federation's Human Affairs Council. The two shook hands. Gasps erupted across the galaxy. The League and the Federation, enemies for decades, were standing together. This isn't enslavement, Mace said. We're not taking your worlds. We're ending your ability to ever enslave again. The soldiers raised their rifles, ancient Earth designs, chosen for symbolism. The sound of the shots echoed across every channel in settled space. When it was over, Vale faced the cameras. Remember this, humanity may fight among itself, but we will unite against our oppressors. The broadcast cut. In the Federation capital, Kayla watched in silence. She could feel the shift ripple through the city, old fears waking again. The illusion of full equality had been cracked, and the fracture was spreading. Years later, Petra Feldorf stood at her university office window, watching students cross the courtyard. A human sat reading under a tree, alone. Other students, scaled, furred, or smooth-skinned, gave him space, without ever admitting they were avoiding him. Petra's latest advisee, a young crack thigh, sat across from her. "I want to prove humans are inherently aggressive," he explained. Petra's fluke twitched in frustration. "Then you need a complete dataset, not just combat sports and war simulations. You're ignoring their art, music, and science." The student hesitated. "But their history is survival," Petra cut in. "Like every species here. Study them honestly, or you're just repeating prejudice." She thought of the generations before her, her great-grandmother Marisol, who had first insisted on keeping human families together, Deluz, who had made education part of the work, Maris, who had fought for legal protections, Kayla, who had offered sanctuary. The pattern was always the same: push forward an inch at a time, against resistance that never went away. When the student left, Petra turned back to the archives. The images of the domes and the seed vaults were all there, proof that cooperation had worked, even in the age of chains. But the galaxy still needed convincing. The Federation Assembly Hall roared with applause as Marina Feldorf and Dominic Carpenter took the podium together. Their fluke and hand intertwined in public, a gesture that would have been scandalous only a generation earlier. "We are here," Dominic began, "not to blame, but to unite. Not to erase the past, but to build a future." Marina's voice joined his seamlessly. "For centuries, our families have stood as proof that differences can be strengths. But proof is not enough. We must move from tolerance to true acceptance." They spoke of the dream, a galaxy where no child had to be exceptional to be accepted, where prejudice was not hidden under polite words, where the past's wounds were not ignored but healed. "Change," Marina concluded, "comes slowly, then suddenly. Today, we plant the seed. What grows will be your choice." As the applause swelled, they stepped down, knowing the seed they'd planted might take years to sprout, but it was in the soil now, alive. Above the city, traffic patterns shifted, ships of a dozen designs weaving together in fragile harmony. Kayla's voice echoed in memory, from her last council speech: "The galaxy once voted to enslave humanity out of fear. Now it begs for mercy out of the same fear. But fear cannot build what comes next. Only courage can." The shadow of that first vote still stretched across the centuries. But within it, something else grew, stubborn, resilient, impossible to kill. Hope.